Welcome to the Proactive Development Interview Series hosted by the Alliance for Education, Development, and Empowerment. My name is Amy Cameron, and I am today's host. The Alliance for Education, Development, and Empowerment was formed by a group of dedicated therapists and teachers from around the United States. Our vision is to empower parents of children with special needs through information and education. Unfortunately, the rate of children diagnosed with some form of developmental delay is growing at an alarming rate. 1 out of 6 children are estimated to have some form of developmental delay, including learning disability, attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity, anxiety, and autism. In my home state of North Carolina, 1 out of 43 boys is diagnosed with autism. While these numbers are shocking, we're also starting to see a huge trend in the field of neurodevelopment. We're seeing more and more parents who are not satisfied with taking their child to the experts and therapists to be fixed. Parents of special needs children are seeking out information and ways that they can become the primary resource for their child. And not surprisingly, these parents are making amazing strides and progress despite the challenges that their children face. These parents, who are no longer satisfied with sitting in waiting rooms, are using the internet and social media to learn about new and sometimes alternative ways to help their children, because the status quo therapies are not doing enough. The Alliance for Education, Development, and Empowerment is dedicated to helping parents in their quest to help their children. This discussion series is meant to provide parents with information about some of the therapies and treatments currently available with that purpose in mind, parents being empowered to help their own children. So as I mentioned previously, my name is Amy Cameron, and I'm the owner of Pathways Treatment Center in Apex, North Carolina. Our center is dedicated to training, teaming, and supporting parents with children who have special needs. The vast majority of the children we see at our center are impacted by autism. I'm a speech pathologist by trade, and I'm certified in the Relationship Development Intervention Program, and I'm currently training to become a core specialist in the Mastigova Sensory Motor Reflex Integration Program. Please check out my website at www.pathwaystreatmentcenter.org. So today I have a great pleasure in talking with my friend Kathy Darrow. Kathy is also a certified RDI Relationship Development Intervention Consultant, and she's from the state of New Jersey. Kathy also has a blog called What is RDI, which provides great information about what she's done with her own children. So I think the most important thing I should say about Kathy, though, is that she is a parent to 4 children, 2 of whom are diagnosed with autism. So I'm so happy to have you here today, Kathy. Hello.
Hi, Amy. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so glad you're here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm always happy to come on and talk about my journey. It certainly is a difficult but at the same time very rewarding one.
So, Kathy, could you tell us a little bit about your journey with your children?
Oh, sure. I guess, let's see, my journey starts, my oldest son, who is diagnosed from the spectrum, is now almost 16 years old. So we're talking 14 years ago. This is when I was kind of thrust into the world of autism.
Wow, I bet you've seen a lot of changes, huh?
Wow, I sure have. And it's really amazing because, you know, when I have an older son who is neurotypical. And so when my second son was born, I kind of started noticing some things, and, around 2 years old, I kept kind of comparing him, and I think that a lot of parents, we tend to kind of compare our kids just to kind of make sure they're on the right track, and I was kind of comparing them, but I really had a lot of increasing concerns that he was very different from my firstborn.
What kind of things were you seeing, Kathy?
Well, he wasn't talking, and a lot of people were telling me, oh, that's okay, my child didn't talk to this or didn't talk till this age. And so it was funny because every time I would have a concern, and these people were well-meaning, but it was kind of like, parent to parent, we always try to encourage one another. And so I would say, my 18-month-old isn't talking at all. And they'd be like, oh, he'll talk when he wants to talk. But something that really stood out in my mind that really kind of solidified that I really need to seek some other direction, some kind of professional help, was that he was in my backyard. We were sitting out in the backyard, and we have a train that goes through my backyard, like maybe once a day. It's not as bad as it sounds.
Like a big, real train, right?
A big train.
Okay.
Like all the kids love my yard. So it went by one day, and now remember, this child never uttered a word, and he was about 18 months old. Mm-hmm. It went by, and he said, train.
Oh.
And I looked, and I'm like, and then he never spoke again for another 2 years.
Oh, my goodness. So were you noticing, so you were definitely noticing that, he had some differences with his speech and language, obviously. Were there other differences that you also noticed or felt?
Well, there was. There definitely was. And I think that the whole thing of, the talking was definitely the huge thing. Mm-hmm. And then other things that I noticed, like after early intervention came in, because I called and I made an appointment for them, and then I made an appointment for a neurologist. And as that really the whole fact that he wasn't talking, I started watching everything. And as I started doing that, I noticed that he was just very, very miserable, and of course I was like, wow, he's just never happy anymore. So that was like another huge thing. And one time when I was picking up one of my kids, my oldest son from school, one of my friends even said, why is he so miserable all the time?
Oh, my.
And so I'm like, okay, so it's not just me then. And she wasn't mean or anything. She's a very good friend. But it was just, to me, that was like, wow, it's obvious. There's there has to be something going on. I mean, I just wanted to go home and cry. Yeah. But it really kind of put me in the track of saying, wait, there's definitely something going on, because I still had a lot of people saying, he's fine.
Mhm. And I hear that same thing from so many parents that, their child isn't speaking, but they're even suspecting something more than that. And it sounds like you were on that track.
Definitely. And, you were talking about first flag sort of thing. That definitely, when I saw what I was looking for, then there were other things. There were things like he had to control everything he was doing. And if he didn't have control over any kind of interaction, he would just totally have a meltdown. He would freak out. He was really inflexible with everything that I was trying to do with him. And it was almost like when he was doing something, and, any mom goes up to their 18-month-old and wants to play with them, wants to join in with them. Mm-hmm. And to have your child freak out because you try to do that, that's very painful. And that's what he was doing.
I hear this so often from parents. When you're in that position with your own child, it really, I think that it is probably the biggest flag that you can have, is that, you feel that there's such a difference.
It is. And it just kept, it was kind of like a gradual thing. You first notice this little thing, then you notice he's not talking, and then it just kind of keeps growing. You have suspicions, and every suspicion is kind of like building on top of one another. Right. And the one pivotal moment that I really had a lot of suspicions, and I just kept trying to play with him, and I was in his bedroom, and we were trying to play. I was trying to get him to play with this little kitchenette that I had purchased, and I'm like, okay, let's pretend we're, washing the vegetables or something like that. And all he wanted to do was just throw the plates from the roof of the kitchenette to the floor and watch them fall. Mm. And it was like I wasn't even there. He didn't even acknowledge I was there. As I'm trying to play with him, he's just kind of in his own world doing, that kind of activity. And so I was like, wow, this really is something that I need to pursue even further. Because at that point, now you remember it was, 14 years ago. Mm-hmm. I even had early intervention telling me he doesn't seem like he has autism.
Wow.
You know, and so finally I did get to the neurologist appointment.
Well, it has to be very, very confusing when even the therapists and experts seem quite unsure of what they're looking at, but you're feeling intuitively as a parent something different than what you're being told.
Absolutely. And, you know, from mom to mom, whenever I talk to somebody or when I work with a family, I always tell them, what's your gut says?
Perfect.
What are you thinking, you know?
Yeah.
And because we know our kids.
That's right. Intuitively, you have this knowledge about your child. So you went ahead and followed up with a neurologist despite what early intervention was saying to you.
I did. And so I made the appointment. I'm sitting in the waiting room, and so now he's my son's about 2.5, and so from 18 months to 2.5, I've had, you know, there were a lot of comments from people, and again, not trying to be mean, but you know, obviously there was something going on, and so I think that a lot of people maybe tried to encourage me, you know, if I said something like, you know, he's still not talking, or he's not wanting to play with me. Like, for example, if I said he's still not talking, then somebody would say to me, oh, he's fine, you probably spoil him too much. He'll talk when you know, don't give him something right away and make him talk, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember sitting in the waiting room thinking, gosh, I hope that's true. I hope it's just me. Like, I hope that I could get, like, some information that maybe it is me, and then we can go home and I can help my child. You know, that actually was the easy answer to make for me.
And
so
I think as a parent, you know, you have to know that you would do anything for your children. So wouldn't it be great if you can just do something and that would help him versus trying to make him do something. So you you received an autism diagnosis, and what path did you take with that?
Yeah, I mean, within 10 minutes, the doctor basically told me, you know, yes, you know, your son has autism. And so, again, many years ago, he basically just told me that he's heard some success with behavioral therapy, but that there's not really much I could do, and that if I needed medication for his behaviors, to let him know.
Wow.
That was kind of like the doctor visit. And so I kind of left in a blur, and he said that his reports would, you know, that he would do a report and, you know, explain everything. And so I don't have to tell you that I felt totally helpless when I left there.
Right, right.
And I didn't have a home computer yet.
Right,
you know,
this was back in
right
the
now,
day, girl.
Right.
So your doctor recommended possibly some behavior therapy and medications, and
That's
sort
right.
of left you there. And unfortunately, I still hear the same story today, that, you know, parents receive a diagnosis and actually very little information about what they can do.
You know, I'm hoping that, you know, one of the things that I'm hoping that will change as we learn more about what autism actually is that very fact. Because it's so frustrating as a parent hearing that parents are still not getting the information that they need to get.
That's right. So how did you end up finding a therapy like RDI that is a parent-based therapy, Kathy?
Well, that's kind of a long story, but I'll try to shorten it. So I found this mom that from the school that my older son went to, and she was doing behavioral therapy with her son. And so she hooked me up, and I actually, you know, learned a little bit about it and got the school district to pay for the behavioral therapy. And I fought hard for, you know, the services, and they decided to fund that. So while this was happening, so that started when he was 3. That's when that started.
Okay.
And I had a lot of therapists coming in and out of the home and everything. And then when my older son was 4, I had another baby.
Mhm.
And so while we were doing the behavioral therapy with my older son, I started watching my younger son, and about at a year, I kind of knew that there was something going on with my younger son.
Oh, Kathy, so did you notice the same types of symptoms with your younger son?
No, he was actually very different. My older son was very controlling, and at this point he was talking, but he wasn't really talking for anything other than his needs. But my younger son was very passive. So he was a really good baby, and I thought, well, I really needed a good baby because I'm going through all this stuff with my older son. So he was this really good baby that kind of just laid around for the first year. And so he was very different in the fact that he didn't really require much of me. And so I just thought he was great. I thought he was this really great baby. And the thing that really struck me, though, was when I really started trying to interact with him, it didn't seem to be there. And I started expressing concerns, to some of my friends, and they were like, "Oh, no, don't compare him with your older son." I kind of went through the whole thing again.
Still the whole same, good intention,
the whole
but
same thing, yeah.
Going against what your gut is saying.
Right. And so I'm driving down the road one day. It was just me and my 14-month-old. And there's traffic ahead of me. And so I decide, well, wait, I'm not going to turn there. There's too much traffic. I'm going to go around and go a different way. And so I turn and I go a different way back home, and my 14-month-old starts freaking out in the back seat crying.
At 14 months.
And I'm like, wait a minute. This is the same kind of inflexibility, rigid thinking.
So, Kathy, he was crying because you went a different direction?
Because I went a different direction.
Wow.
Yeah, and so because, as any mom that has lived through autism once, then you really start knowing those signs.
Right.
And so, I started him with therapy too, and
with the behavior-based therapy also?
Behavior-based therapy.
Okay.
And so we started him with that, and he really wasn't making any progress with that at all. Now let me back up and just say that my older son, now if you think he's been in therapy for about 2.5 years, he's talking now, and he's doing some skills. He's learning some skills. But I would say after about the first year of being in behavioral therapy, after that, his skill learning kind of stalled. There wasn't really much more that he was learning, and he got really behavioral. So the behaviors weren't improving at all. And his language, even though I was absolutely thrilled that he was talking, because, I'm like, oh, please, if he could just talk. That's all I need, for him to just talk. And then I almost felt like as a mom, if he just would talk, everything would be fine. And so he was talking, but he was just talking to get his needs met. He was talking, juice, and he was hungry, and he wanted to go outside, but he wasn't relating to me at all. It wasn't any kind of communication, no back and forth. It was just kind of talking at me.
Yeah, it's so interesting. As my journey as a speech pathologist working with kids with ASD was very similar in that I could usually get kids to talk, but the end result wasn't about the kid just talking. It was about the kid actually communicating reciprocally. And it was so frustrating for me to see that and wonder, had I really done this child any real service? I mean, I guess reduction of frustration is something, but, it just felt to me like there was so much more that was missing, and that's exactly what you're describing, Kathy.
Absolutely. And honestly, I didn't know that there could be more because I didn't know it's like, well, that's autism. And so, I kind of was like, okay, well, I guess that's as good as it's going to get. I was told that's as good as it's going to get. And my older son was so behavioral that he had to actually go to a school for children with autism in first grade.
So what do you mean by that? He was so behavioral. Do you mean he had bad behaviors, or what is the story with that?
Yeah, he would go into the classroom at school with an aide, and he would do everything he could. He would throw pencils off the desk. He would just do anything he could to irritate anyone around him. And of course, I'm sure there's a reason for it, but we all couldn't figure it out at the time.
Right.
And there were times that we would have group meetings because he was still, in a behavioral program, and we would have group meetings and we would have to talk about how to restrain him.
Oh my goodness.
I would have to sit there and listen in a meeting with 3 therapists talking about restraining methods.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And at this exact same time, basically, my younger son was about 8-9 months into a behavioral program and making no progress at all, making none. And so I'm like, wait a minute.
So you were at a pretty bad point.
I was at a pretty bad point. I was like,
even
oh my
having
God.
the school district pay for the experts, even having the therapy in your home, and even having the school provide therapy for the kid, you were with both the boys. You were in a really bad position.
Yeah, it was kind of like,
heartbreaking.
Wait a minute, I did everything I was supposed to do.
Right.
How come, And so it's good that it happened because by this time I had a computer. And, I started doing some research, but more importantly at this time, a friend of mine called me and was talking to me about her child with autism and said, we're starting doing RDI therapy with him. And I was like, RDI? What's RDI? And right, exactly. And so she explained it to me, and I'm like, I just did a lot of, okay. And we hung up, and I basically went right on Google and Googled, what is RDI? And
well, tell me, Kathy, what did she tell you about RDI that even raised your curiosity?
Well, she, without me even telling her what my concerns were for my kids, she was just talking about her child. And she just said exactly what I saw with my kids. She said that she didn't feel like her son was relating to her. It was just, it was talking. It wasn't true, meaningful communication back and forth. Her son was inflexible. It was like she was just the person there to fulfill his every need and want.
Okay.
Those sort of things. And I sat there and I listened to her and I thought, how did she know all this?
Yeah.
How did she know that I'm going through the exact same thing?
Right. And again, not just you going through that, but all of us in the field of autism feeling the same way, feeling like, we weren't really affecting the change that we hoped to see.
Right.
So frustrating.
Yeah.
So you Googled RDI, and what did you do then?
Well, I found some strategies, and at the time I found that I could go online and speak to the founder, the creator of RDI on a chat, and so that's what I did. I started really delving into that, and me and 2 of my son's therapists, my younger son now, because my older son was in school. So we started RDI with my younger one first. And so we started changing some things we were doing with him. And within 2 weeks, we all sat around and we were like, do you notice that, Jesse's actually, gazing at us more? Do you notice that he's not crying every minute of the day now? He's actually, smiled a few times? We were all blown away. We truly were. And so I was excited. I was thrilled. And so the more I learned, the more I just started implementing things that I could implement into the day.
That's great, Kathy.
Yeah.
So what kind of things are those that you're talking about?
Well, those kind of things are things like slowing down what we were doing. One of the things that we were doing with him was we were prompting him all the time to do things. And
right.
we just sat there and we're trying to get him to do things all day, so we're kind of like prompting him through an activity all day, and then we're doing all the work. Well, you know, think about ourselves. How would we feel if we're prompted all day?
Right, if you're kind of remote control driven
right.
by somebody else.
Yeah, and so and I'm wondering why he's miserable. So
right.
one of the things we did was we really said, okay, you know, we want him to make a deliberate attempt to do something once we do something. So that requires you have to wait. You know, if you're going to put your hand out, you're not going to put your hand out to take him for a walk. You're going to put your hand out and you're going to wait for him to reach out to you. It's like very simple sort of
but
thing.
Kathy,
but
what if it's not instant? What if he doesn't do it quickly? This world is so fast, isn't it? It is such a fast world that we live in. We expect very fast and accurate results. But if you have a developmental delay, especially one like autism, it takes a little longer to think about that stuff, doesn't it?
That's right, and that's another thing that we really had to change how we were interacting. We had to give him that time to process what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we didn't, we would be on to the next thing, and he would just be trying to catch up. And so no wonder he never wanted to interact with us, because it was just way too overwhelming.
Right. I would want to sort of withdraw from the world, I think, if everything was going so quickly and was so changing all the time and dynamic, and I felt like I was sort of way, way back somewhere else.
Right. And it's interesting, too, because just those very two simple strategies, I mean, there's tons of strategies, but just those very simple two strategies.
So the two strategies of slowing down and
giving processing time for thinking.
Yes, exactly.
And so
not just slowing down like the Bionic Man, not just going really
slow.
Right.
No, a very strategic way. You know, a very strategic way of saying, hey, I'm going to wait for you.
Yeah.
I'm slowing down to wait because I want you to have this action with me. And what's amazing is when I saw that those little, you know, beginning changes made such a huge, profound effect, I'm like, wow, wait, my first grader needs this. You know, my second grade, well, he was actually now in second grade, but my second grader so needs this. So it was such a great experience to think, wow, I can do something else. He's not done. You know, there's something else I can do for him. And then that's when we started RDI with him, too.
Well, I think what you're mentioning, Kathy, is sort of a common myth in the world of autism, is that, you know, once your kid hits a certain age, that nothing else can be done.
That's right. And I was told that directly.
Yeah.
And, you know, as a mom, I'm like, you know what? I will never believe it.
That's right. You don't mess with a mom.
That's right. That's right.
And you definitely don't mess with a mom with a child who has autism. Because I think, Kathy, at least you and all the other moms that I know who have children with autism, I mean, the one thing that I've really learned from you guys is about the resilience that it took. And just in your story, you can hear this. You can hear that, you know, your gut was telling you something different than the experts were telling you. And you trusted yourself enough to pursue something that you know is a better fit for your child.
That's right. And, I mean, it's a roller coaster ride. It's one of those major loop-to-loop roller coaster rides.
Let me ask you something, Kathy. How do you, like, what is it about you having this type of resilience? I mean, why didn't you just give up and say, well, that's what they told me, that's all that can be done? How did you find that inner strength to keep, you know, pursuing what you knew was right for your child, for your children?
Yeah, I think that I don't know. I just think that hope, you know, it's just clinging on to hope and just knowing, wait, I know that, you know, other people telling me things about my own kids and then me just knowing. I think that just as a mom, you know that you can push your child to wherever they're going to be. It's not,
right.
I'm not saying that every child's going to be a certain way, but as a mom, we have just that inbred way of just knowing that, we can foster our kids to be whatever, the best that they can be.
Yeah. Boy,
And
this
so
is what I love about you the most, Kathy, is that kind of resilience and belief in yourself. And, wow, how much we can all learn from that. So Kathy, you started RDI with your boys. Can you tell me the kinds of differences that you were starting to notice with the boys and their development once you started RDI?
Well, when we started some beginning strategies, and I kind of want to lay this out there because I think that sometimes people think that RDI is just about slowing down and processing time.
Yeah.
But RDI
that's most of the
much
information on the Internet about RDI.
Right.
That's the word on the street, I think.
Yeah. Right, and it's great information. It's definitely great information because it gets you prepped per se for the real work. And but I just want to kind of like lay out there, but that's kind of like the beginning foundation to be laid. And then once we started working on objectives, like actual objectives, which what that does is, an objective will remediate, which means, go back and work on a developmental milestone that my sons never got the first time around because of their autism. And so, for example, my younger son, he couldn't regulate himself with us, like you were saying about what if they don't take your hand, and I was saying wait. Well, that's a milestone. That's a very basic milestone that, a 3 to 9 month old typical child gets that interaction.
Right.
And so the heart of the foundation of RDI is to go back and start working on those milestones. And so some of the things I saw, obviously, when we started giving both my kids that second chance to redo that developmental piece is, they became more regulated. They were able to have a back and forth kind of relationship with me. They would take a role in an activity, meaning it wasn't like me doing all the work. If I picked up my son from an event, instead of saying, how was your day? What did you do? He would start to volunteer information to me because he wanted to get my perspective.
Wow.
So it was just huge things that we saw happening.
So you were seeing more reciprocity and more input from your boys.
That's right.
Wow.
And so as they got back on the developmental track, then everything I started seeing that they were learning things incidentally instead of, I spent years trying to teach them every little thing as far as what to do, but now that I was going back and filling in their development, they were picking things up from their environment.
Wow. Because it would be impossible to teach some things directly, huh?
Absolutely.
How do you teach a child to take your hand?
That's right.
Or when that's okay, or when it's not okay, or when, how do you do that? And so I think that's just such an amazing thing to start to see and feel from a child because they start to develop themselves, huh?
Right, and it reminds me, it's the huge thing is the motivation to interact.
Yes. So that's the same thing that I hear a lot from a lot of parents. Well, he doesn't have any motivation to do anything except for what he wants to do.
Right, and that's why people will, well-meaning, in the field of autism, they're trying to get the kids motivated by maybe some sort of reinforcers. But, that's not, I want my kids motivated because of the relationship, because they're relating to me.
Right. I've heard some experts say that, everything is basically externally reinforced. And I'm not so sure about that. I don't know. What are your feelings on the differences between external motivation and internal motivation?
Well, I mean,
can you think about some differences you saw with your sons between being externally motivated and internally driven?
Well, I mean, I think that just them, coming up to me and showing me something instead of me saying, draw this and bring it to me and you'll get some candy.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a very simplistic way of, it's just very different. Think of how, if he comes up to me and gives me the picture and I give him the candy, he didn't really, he wasn't motivated with me. It was about the picture. It wasn't about mom and him. It was, all right, I want the candy and give him the picture. And so I think that, again, it just has a lot to do with that relationship piece. And I think that it also has a lot to do with the development of dynamic and static intelligence. And I know
let's talk about that.
RDI kind of features that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about that. So,
okay.
Dynamic and static intelligence. When I think about intelligence, I guess I'm always thinking about IQ tests.
Right. And you know what? That is a piece of intelligence. I mean, that definitely is. But then you have that other piece where it's not about the IQ at all. It's about, how are you relating? How are you thinking on your feet? How are you taking people's perspective? There was this chart that I saw early on in my RDI journey, and it broke down. On the dynamic side, it had dynamic intelligence, and then the static side, it lists all the qualities of static intelligence. And when I saw that chart, I said, "Oh my gosh, my sons are really, pretty good at all the static things like memorization, black and white thinking." And then when I looked at the dynamic side and I saw perspective taking, flexibility, I was like, ooh, yeah.
So, Kathy, I think I think it would be great if we could share the chart. I think a lot of our listeners may benefit from understanding the chart. And so I'm going to get a hold of that from Kathy, and we'll upload that. And that's also available on your blog, right, Kathy?
It is on my blog.
Okay, give us the address for your blog again.
Sure. It's www.whatisrdi.blogspot.com.
Great. Okay, so we'll have that chart describing some of the abilities between static versus dynamic intelligence available for those of you who are listening on our website. So Kathy, with static intelligence, this black and white thinking and memorization, and doing things predictably and within pattern, you found that your sons were pretty strong.
Yeah, they were strong. I mean, I didn't really see a lot of things that I needed to work on per se. And as a matter of fact, I saw that when they were younger in their behavioral program, we were actually doing a lot of things to promote the static side.
Great. So the static side of things is good. This is good.
Absolutely.
To have strong static intelligence because you have to be able to follow rules and do math and things that are more linear. But let's talk a little more about dynamic intelligence. So what do you can you describe to us some things that would fit under the area of dynamic intelligence?
Well, dynamic intelligence is more about, collaborating or perspective taking or knowing what to do when something is not black and white, like it's a gray area. And I like to give this example. You're driving down the road and you stop at a red light. So your static intelligence knows the rules. It knows red means stop, I need to stop. But what if, that stoplight breaks and it's not going to turn green? Then our dynamic intelligence, it goes into problem-solving mode. Okay, well, I can't sit here all day, obviously. There's something wrong with the light. I'm going to look both ways. So we need both. And, if you think about when you're looking at a picture, a lot of kids with autism, when they look at pictures, they kind of just see that picture as, a girl or a blue shirt or,
They're literally what's happening in the picture.
That's right. That's right. And with your dynamic intelligence, then you can relate to that picture of the last time you did that, the experience, whatever that picture is. And
what that reminds you of, yes.
That's right. And so, we need both. We need both, and we need both to have a really high quality of life. Employers, I know school is very much based on static. Memorize the facts, take the test, get the A, and, that's fine. But it's
because that's measurable, isn't it, Kathy? I mean,
it's measurable. That's
the
right.
thing about
That's
static
right.
intelligence is that it's good and it's very skill based and it can be measured. It's right or it's wrong.
That's right.
But
That's right.
most of the world that we live in is very, very dynamic, and so
That's right.
it sounds to me like you're saying that with dynamic intelligence, it's a matter of making choices that are not so clear cut. Making some decisions that are sort of best fit decisions.
And being able to, collaborate and be a team player. Think about what employers look for when they're hiring somebody.
Exactly, because nothing is ever going to go exactly as planned.
Yeah, and so, one of the very exciting things for me when I saw that chart was that I'm like, wow, there's a way for me to work on dynamic intelligence. This is awesome.
So that way is done through RDI, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So that's amazing to me because, I was trained at very good schools and I pursued a lot of information about autism. And that was the thing that struck me about the information that Dr. Gutstein presented the first time I heard him speak. He was talking about that stuff that always feels a little not so clear-cut and not so well-defined by measurable standards. And so, I that's what I really loved. I loved that there was a way to work on that.
That's right. That's right. And it gave me, in a lot of ways, it gave me my hope back.
So, Kathy, you saw such great progress with your boys, and you decided to take it a step further, didn't you?
I sure did, yeah. I definitely wanted, I was talking to a lot of moms, and I was just so thrilled to be able to tell them about RDI. One of the reasons that I created the blog was, I didn't want anyone to not know about RDI, to ask that same question, without having like a resource to go to. So after talking to a lot of parents and I decided that I wanted to go for training to do this professionally. I just had such a passion for helping other families.
Mhm. And so you decided to become an RDI consultant yourself?
I did. Yes, I did. And so in 2008, that's when I went to Houston and started the process, and it's kind of been, great ever since. I've been able to help lots of families and kind of get the word out about RDI, and most importantly, I've gotten to see such progress with, other kids that I'm working with, not just my kids now. I'm kind of like a progress addict now, because I'm like, it's just so great to see, not only to see these kids make progress, but to be able to take parents and really, be able to walk them through, education and being able to guide their child pretty much, out of autism, that grip that, they feel like they have no control over.
That's great, Kathy. Can you sort of describe for our listeners what that's like working with an RDI consultant? Like how do you work with families and what is that process like for a family, now, in 2012?
Okay, right. Well, when I was doing RDI, there were a lot of, objectives, but there weren't really any parent objectives. And so I was kind of on my own as far as myself went. And so, to try to help my child, I had to figure out how to change things that I was doing. But the great thing now about RDI in 2012 is the program has that built in, where the consultant leads the parent through, the parent's decision points on how they're interacting with their child to create kind of this optimal environment for them, for both the parent and the child. And so one of the things that I love now is that it really fosters the resilience and competency of not only the child but the parents.
Oh, I love that too, Kathy. I love empowering parents, giving them that information that they need, supporting them, and brainstorming with them when we're getting stuck on one of those developmental redos that we're trying to do.
That's right.
It's so great to team up with families and to help them realize that, they're not alone in that journey. So I think that's great. So as a consultant, how often do you need to work with families?
Most of my families I work with, every week. We're working on objectives. We're working on lots of different things. And I think that one of the key parts with RDI that is different, that's very unique, is when I'm working with families, I'm looking at their schedule. I'm looking at what they're doing and putting RDI into their day instead of making it, you need to come out of your day to do therapy with your child.
Right.
Instead, I'm inserting it into their day. And it makes a huge difference because it becomes, where they're very competent in those day-to-day, real-life activities.
Right, and that's where all the real stuff happens, is in real day-to-day things. And so as a parent, I often hear parents who are fearful of the fact that, maybe they don't have enough time to do RDI. They don't know that they have, 3, 4, 5, up to 8 hours a day to work in a room with their kids.
Right.
So it's such a great point that you're making.
That's okay.
Yeah, thank goodness, yeah. We don't want a kid in a room. That's great.
I mean, with 4 kids, I didn't have the time either. That I needed a program that showed me how to incorporate it into my life.
Right. So, Kathy, there's one more point that I want to bring up before we wrap it up here about RDI and the consultant, the consultant format for therapy versus direct therapy with kids. You mentioned that you have 4 kids. I myself have 3, and holy cow, I don't know how I could ever pay for a huge amount of therapy for my children.
Right.
So what difference do you see in terms of the RDI model and pricing for parents?
Wow. Well, I have to say that with a behavioral model, speaking in my experience, with both my own kids and working with families, obviously it's going to be costly to have different people come in to work with your child. And
1
so
hour
with
at a
RDI,
time.
that's right. And so with RDI, since it's a parent training model, it's the most cost-effective way.
It's like the fishing pole, isn't it?
It is. It is.
That Chinese saying, Kath, it says, give a man a fish and he eats for a day, and you give him the pole and he's eating forever.
That's right. That's right.
Something like that.
Right. There you go. And I remember even, in the early days when all my therapists would leave, and I know there were days that I've had 2 sets of therapists coming in and out. They would leave, and I would be like, okay, so what do I do now with my kids at nighttime?
Yeah.
There wasn't a training model. I didn't really have I knew how to do behavioral therapy, but I wanted to do real life things. I wanted to, be a mom who just did the typical things with their kids. And so
real life,
that's what's wonderful about the training model.
I have to say I agree with you, Kathy. I mean, I think that parents are hungry for the information and happy to work with their own children if they just know what to do and they have the support and that they need. So, Kathy, I have to wrap up this conversation. It's been a great conversation, and thank you so much for sharing this information with our listeners. Please, if you are listening to this recording, We would love to save this conversation for you so that you are able to share it with other parents that you know, or even other therapists that are interested in helping children with their dynamic intelligence. So thank you for coming today, and I look forward to more talks like this. Once again, thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, Amy.